Lessons come to us in so many different ways, but the more exciting the lessons are usually the time when we get to travel around the world and get to experience them. Welcome to Let's Get Real. My name is Glenda Kroll. I'll be one of your hosts today, as well as
Nicole Harvick here for your entertainment pleasure. I love Wednesdays, Glenda. I always look forward to them because it's hump day and everybody's like, but it's really fun for me to hop on here and have us meet new people and open people's eyes to new experiences. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. And we have an amazing guest. Now, I've known this young lady for quite a while. We've had a lot of really long talks, which have just we don't ever plan anything and they just go in so many different directions, and it's been so fun to get to know her, and I'm so glad she agreed to come on today. And this lovely lady is the founder of the award-winning travel site Embolden Adventures, and after she finishes her story you'll understand why she chose that name. She is many things, but she is a public speaker, she's a travel storyteller, she's an author, and I think most importantly, she's an adventurer, and I can vouch for that. She's visited 42 countries, and she's learned the secret of the universe through many ayahuasca ceremonies. So I want to invite to our stage Sarah Racasano.
Hi, thank you, Nicole. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you for having me.
Thank you
And
so
hi,
much.
Glenda.
welcome, Sarah.
Yeah, and I know I said your name right, so I'm really excited about that. And Sarah, one of the things, this is going to be like a different type of podcast, and it's not the norm for everybody in terms of what we're going to talk about. So what I want to start with are three questions for you. I want you to tell people where you went to school, where you lived, and what was your job.
Okay, seems like easy questions.
You can do this. We've talked about this.
More complicated answers. So where I went to school, undergrad, I went to Cornell University. I was an engineering student there. And I also did concentrations in economics and in entrepreneurship with the hopes of going to Wall Street. And yeah, then I made it. I was an investment banker on Wall Street for 10 years almost. And I lived through the financial crisis of 2008 as a banker, seeing at the front lines of, the global breakdown of financial markets and whatnot, and then it making its way to Main Street. And then while that was happening, I was finishing up my MBA at NYU Stern on a part-time basis. So I went ahead and got my degree while I was working as a 100-hour work week as an investment banker, 2.5 years straight. And then once I was done living through that financial crisis, and then, coming up for air, about a year or two later, I started this beautiful adventure of seeing the world.
Yeah.
And so that got me to see, the 42 plus countries we mentioned in this intro and beyond, and my spiritual awakening as a result. And so I lived my life for about 20 years up until this month coming up in New York City. And I made the courageous decision about 2 years ago to surrender. And this is now the kind of next chapter of my life of being a storyteller and a public speaker and so many more things, and really kind of stepping up this passion project that is Embolden Adventures. And so I'm in the process of writing my first book of a series of trilogies based on exactly the story of the surrender piece and changing my life for the better.
I have this knowing thing that there's got to be a reason, like what made you give up your job to go start traveling? Was there not?
Yeah, so the go start traveling was kind of kicked into high gear in some ways once I decided to surrender in 2022. But I had been traveling for quite a while during and leading up to. And a lot of that traveling has been sort of like a balance to the extreme sort of existence that is corporate America, finance, really kind of A plus type personality sort of working environments in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. And so my savior was traveling. My savior was scuba diving. My savior was the mystical exploration of the world that got me kind of rebalanced from that sort of, difficult, high energy, high octane sort of life that went on for so long. And then that surrender point I hit was in 2022. And that is going to be the second part of the trilogy that I'm writing. The surrender point really happened in my apartment that I'm literally selling at the moment and closing hopefully in another 2 weeks in my kitchen. And it was leading up to three things that kind of drove it. It was living through coronavirus in Midtown Manhattan in my tiny apartment without access to sunlight because we're in these small apartments with small buildings, tall buildings around us, no really clear like evidence of nature. So we had that, and we had a really difficult relationship that I was in that was cratering while this was happening. And also, my job was just a difficult experience. And so, all three of them were a perfect storm that made me one day after a conference call, not going very well with the president of the company, saying a comment that just didn't sit right with me. But it was really the last straw that broke the camel's back. That sort of conference call, on any other given day in another year, I would have weathered it, no problem. But this was the trigger point that once I got off, I said, that's it, I quit. And I haven't looked back since. And that's when I kickstarted venturing that really drove me from a spiritual exploration that I'm chronicling in this beautiful trilogy I'm writing.
Wow. And what does surrender mean to you? When you say surrender, I mean, I understand what it is, but there's so many different, it means something different to everyone. What did it mean to you?
So it's a feeling. It's something that my analytical brain didn't understand, right? Here I am, an engineer. Here I am, quant person, finance, MBA, and running so many different deals throughout my career. I touched $30 billion of deals over the 20 years I've been employed. And I've had job losses in between. So I lost my job 3 times and had some periods of unemployment in the mix. But all throughout that whole experience is sort of like I'm in control. I'm a planner. I got everything, risk adjusted, risk assessed. And, this is how it's going to be because I say so. I'm trying to force the way through. And the world around me behaves in such a way too. But surrender does not mean that. Surrender means that nothing is working, nothing feels right. I don't know what else to do other than to say I give up. And I give my power to a higher power, whatever that is. I don't even know. It's a cry for help. I got goosebumps. That's validation. But it's also at a point where you have no option but to hope that good things are on your way without forcing the square peg into the round hole kind of analytical mind that I just described.
Yeah. And when you did surrender, how did that work for you?
Oh, it's not easy. It's not a walk in the park, rainbows and sunshine and, skipping with unicorns. It's not like that at all. It was, like, I can't take this anymore. It was in the midst of the, I guess, emotional turmoil that was going on, right? Crying and frustration and want to like punch a wall and just pissed off, man. This is not okay. Knowing all that on the surface, and then underneath there was a still soft voice that knows you're going to be fine. And that's like, oh, I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to take the bet on me that whatever this is, this sort of assurance given the turmoil that's going around me is the voice to listen to. And I've heard that voice in other instances throughout my career, especially when things were about to go down that were pretty bad. That still soft voice kind of almost like stops time and gets in your head, and it's like, you're cool, just trust, let it ride, don't go deep with it, don't get flustered, verklempt, just kind of trust that things are going to be fine, but it's going to be rocky. And that I think is the surrender. It's this truth to somehow believe because you have nothing else to kind of grasp to.
Interesting.
That's the hardest part of it all, right? To be able to believe that, if I jump ship type of thing, that, that I'm going to land on my feet, or, it might be a little tricky at some points, but that I'm going to keep on being able to go. Having that type of faith is a lot to be able to do for yourself.
That's true. And faith is something I'm building. And it's the story of my trilogy because, I never really was a person that just kind of believed in something just for the sake of believing. It's always prove it to me, where's
Yeah.
the proof? Let's kind of get in and kind of stress test this if this is really true. But the reality is, faith is something you grow. It's a muscle, and you learn how to trust it in ways that just aren't taught in the classroom, I think, over textbook or some sort of Excel spreadsheet model. It's something that is an ongoing exercise. Even today, I'm still like, wait, is this real? Like, what should I be believing? Like, I don't know if this, like, am I going crazy? Like, what's going on here? Right? It's something you continue to work on, and this is why Nicole and I have our conversations the way we do, because it's a validation point. It's learning how to trust something within, but then also kind of working with, your surrounded kind of tribe, if you will, right, of spirituality, and kind of running things past each other, like, well, what do you think about this? So Nicole's been nothing but a wealth of just insight, knowledge, and support. So I can't thank you enough.
And the world that we live in isn't always tangible. There's nothing, like with money, or all the things that you were doing on Wall Street, that's a little more tangible than what you're doing now. And I'm curious, I don't even think I've ever asked you this. What did colleagues, friends, and parents say when you first decided to take this leap into what you're doing now?
I think, I look back, and it kind of was like you're operating in this like robot mode. You don't really know. You're just kind of going, and you just, or this is what I have to do, and I'm going to do it, and I'll deal with it later, the repercussions. When I decided to surrender at that point in my apartment, it was like a Friday afternoon. I just said, I'm going to write a book. And that's that. And then I called my father crying, like in my 40s, and I'm hysterical. And I said, I'm getting on a train. I'm going home. I'm just going to come home. And my dad said, okay, I'll come pick you up. It was very calm. But, I usually am not the emotional type. So for me to be crying, I'm sure he knew it was a big deal. And they were they have been to this day very supportive, and no one's been saying, get back to work, you're screwing up your life, you're not following the path you're supposed to be on, because I think they've been friends and family, loved ones have been watching me, be this adventurer for so long, while I had a day job, right? And so they know that I already gave, my effort. I already showed up and tried to do what society's saying you have to do, and it's not working. So now it's time to like trust that I'm going to try something new, and I've granted myself this opportunity. It's almost as if, I've been waiting for this to happen, and I've been prepared for it to happen. So now it's time to let it happen. So I think people around me who've watched this story of mine for so long, because I did everything I was supposed to do and I did it right, and it's still not working. Okay, so let's just kind of see where Sarah's going with this one. And that's the trusting, and then the unfolding and all that. And, the more you really kind of continue down this path of letting the universe guide you, the more these beautiful surprises come your way that you didn't anticipate. So that's really what's cool too. And I think a lot of people are seeing like, oh wait, what else is happening now? I didn't see that on my bingo card. That's cool. Okay, keep going, keep going.
When you say it's not working, let's look at it in another way. So it's not working because of it's not giving you what you need. Because if somebody's looking out from the outside looking in, I should say, it looks like things were working. You had a job, and quite a good job. You had a career going on. So in the outside world, it looked as though it was working, but something wasn't working within you. Is that correct?
That's right. The inside world wasn't working.
Okay.
And the inside world wasn't working Mainly not because only it was my problem and self-inflicted. It was I'm also reacting to a world that I know intimately, day in and day out, that the outside world, social media land, LinkedIn land, doesn't really have a true grasp of. So, these worlds I've lived in and grown up in career-wise and otherwise are really tough environments that you may think are stable economies, but they're not. And there's constant revolving door, there's constant bad management, there's constant just difficulties. And it's just not it doesn't feel right. It's something where when you're crying on a daily basis in an office, like that's not working. Like, why am I wasting my hard-earned time
Mhm.
commuting an hour and a half every way? I'm getting stuck on a train for hours sometimes. Like, is it worth it? And it's not just the commute that was a problem, or New York City's energy that was a problem. It's everything sometimes. And you're right, like for some, they're willing to put up with it and they're willing to give the effort, and it works for them. And for me, I think I just have been evolving, and I'm realizing that what, it's after a while, trying to push that boulder up a hill one too many times, it's time to say no more boulder, no more hill.
Mm, exactly.
So, when you first started your first adventure, where did you set off to?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first time I think I ever really left the country, I was in high school, and that's when I learned how to scuba dive. It was not a great experience though, because I injured my ear and had a
Oh,
problem. Yeah, but that didn't deter me, because then when I decided I was going to go scuba diving again when I was in my I was 30 at the time, that's what kind of opened my world to really adventure in so many ways. But prior to that, I had gone, left the country here and there for, friends' international weddings, and, going on a tour with high school or whatnot. But it really, really kickstarted after I got the MBA, and kind of allowed for more space. No longer am I doing the part-time, grind of school and the 100-hour work week. Now I had this brand new opportunity of free time, and so I just started scuba diving, and that opened my horizons in so many more ways, of getting on planes, going diving, and then going on trips that surround, the dive boat that I just had been on for a week.
and I'm curious, when that was the start of your journey, knowing you wanted to see the world, but what was your epiphany for wanting you to experience the universe? And that would take us to your ayahuasca journeys. And how did I've heard of it, I know of it, I know of psilocybin, I've done that, but what was like your catalyst for thinking, I need to try that, I need to do that?
Oh, it's a long story, because as I'm, growing and evolving and being curious about the world, the spiritual story had been growing, evolving, and becoming curious to me as well. And, so we're talking almost 20 years now of just this a little bit of exploration, if you will. And, even when I was younger, I was curious about, like, what's a tarot card reader? What's a psychic? What's this? And, back in the day, so loved the show. I still do, Ancient Aliens, and they would show, places around the world. I know, it's great. It's a great show. And you're like, oh my God, Machu Picchu, or oh my God, Stonehenge, what are they saying? And so that's kind of what, it's a little bit of here, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. And a lot of it started too when I lost my job. So I mentioned I was out of work for 3 times, unemployed, because the careers I chose, Wall Street, renewable energy, and the like, are fraught with instability. So naturally, I had lost my job a few times. And in those periods of unemployment, my spiritual kind of practice and my curiosity had grown. So I've been working with past life regression facilitators, and with mediums and spiritual teachers and others, in addition to the curiosity of ancient alien locations and the like. But I think the psychedelic piece of the story, it really started kind of instantaneously. It wasn't something that I had been doing in my time in my 20s and 30s in New York City, or even in college. My sort of existence in New York, if you could imagine, was, work hard, play hard. We'd go to the clubs and get bottles, and, drink alcohol. It's like that kind of existence, right? DJs and, all that, bars and that sort of scene. Never touched any drugs in my life, though, and never did any cocaine, none of that. And I seldomly smoked marijuana. But I was always really curious about like psychedelics, like what does that mean, and how does it relate to meditation, and how does it relate to like things you see with your mind's eye? So leading up to this sort of discovery, I had my third eye open, so I started seeing visions naturally, not with the help of any sort of plant medicine. And so 2019, this is where I start my first book that is now finished. 2019, I was called to the rainforest by Mama Ayahuasca, and I didn't understand it at the time. I dared the universe that if I got laid off, I would go join my friend in the Amazon and do 7 ayahuasca ceremonies. No idea what I was getting myself into. No idea really what ayahuasca was. I just had an invitation from a spiritual friend. And sure enough, within days that happened. I got laid off. I was the last one added to a list. I wasn't supposed to be laid off. It happened. The universe opened the door for me to come. And I was in the rainforest in the Amazon for 2 weeks, completely removed from society, right on the heels of coronavirus hitting the world. So I came back to New York City after a 5-week adventure, which I, go into details to how I tacked on a few other sort of experiences while I was there. And I came back to New York right when things were shutting down with open spiritual mindset of the world in a way that I never had when I got on that plane in January of 2020. So yeah, that's what the book talks about. Like, it's just an awakening, and it's incredible. And I continue now to, grow with this beautiful sort of education I'm getting from plant medicines and wisdom keepers and my travels from around the world. So it's quite a story the last 4 years, I have to say.
And I can't wait to read your book, but give us a little tidbit of what Pachamama told you, what the medicine told you, what you learned from the ancient wisdom of the people that were assisting you with the medicine.
Oh, there's so many beautiful wisdoms. So Pachamama, who is the Incan fertility goddess and the earth goddess, she came to me in vision during my past life regression session at Dr. Brian Weiss's session in the Javits Center years prior. So the book, when I first start the book, I talk about that history that I had with exploration in the spiritual realms, as I just described, for years leading up to 2019, 2020. And one of them was a session with Dr. Brian Weiss. I've attended a few with him, but this one in particular, and the timing, the coincidental timing of it all, it just was a beautiful set of coincidences that just, you can't deny that something's going on here. And so Pachamama and Viracocha, which is the Incan creator deity that they believe in, both came to me in vision during a past life regression session 3 years prior of me going to the rainforest. And it essentially was a rainforest vision, which I didn't understand at the time, 3 years prior. Didn't even know what ayahuasca was I think the session was 2017. So Pachamama actually came through sort of in the ayahuasca sessions with the wisdom keepers, but it was really Mama Ayahuasca, who's a different spirit. She is a spirit that embodies the ayahuasca vine, as they believe. And my book goes into detail about how I see the interconnections with my hometown in Connecticut, and how Mama Ayahuasca really is helping heal traumas. She's embodying the vine as medicine to heal traumas, but it has something to do with a connection point here in my hometown in Connecticut, which I discovered, which is such an amazing, like, mind-blowing thing. It's so beautiful. But the wisdoms, not only did Mama Ayahuasca, Pachamama, even Viracocha, who appeared in some of these visions in ceremony, really, in a long and short of it is that protect the plants. That's important. And the importance of nature, the importance of connection to the power of nature, reciprocity, the give and take of things. Nothing matters was another thing that was like, wait, what? How does nothing matter? Nothing matters. We're in an illusion. But what does matter is love, which is the highest vibrational energy there is. And so my book, I think I'm doing a great job describing like what went in my head, what were the visions, what were the messages, and how it all triangulates and continues to unfold like the nautilus shell it is, the sacred geometric sort of patterns. Nothing matters. It's an illusion, but it's love at the end of the day. And we are such powerful creators and manifestors. And that's the trilogy story, right? This was just the beginning of my awakening. And then I surrendered 2 years later and continue onward with my education and my growth with the Wisdom Keepers and with you, Nicole. But there's so much more that meets the eye. And all it is just beautiful, loving awareness. And we have the power to really change our lives for what we want it to be. Hence why it's so important to trust in the unfolding and believe through feeling. Your emotions really guide you in the directions you're being called to go.
And how does it feel when you have that love in your heart? I want you to describe it. I'll see if mine's the same. For me, it was just life-changing. So how did you feel?
It's like a lightness. It's a truth. It's an unwavering faith. It's just a trust and a knowing. And I say that all the time. It's a knowing, and it just pops into your head. You're like, oh, I just know. I just know. I see the visions. I just know. And like, how do I prove that from an engineering mind? I don't know, but I'm going with it. But as you know, Nicole, like I'm doing a lot of like letting go of the energies that are still built up in me. And a lot has to do with New York City, the concrete, the energies, like the anger, New York obviously has changed a lot as a result of coronavirus and other sort of things that are plaguing the city at the moment. And as I said, I've lived there for over 20 years. So I've seen the shifting and the changing and the evolution of it all. And the energy there for me, it doesn't fit anymore for me. It's a place that doesn't serve me anymore. I don't recognize it. I don't feel good. So as you know, Nicole, I'm letting go of a lot of those energies that are lower vibrational energies, right? Anger, hate, frustration, all this. It's and I can notice the difference of what it's like to feel the love in your heart versus the other sort of lower vibrational energies. And it's still a work in progress. It's not to say that, okay, because I feel love, therefore I'm like this all day long, every day of the week, forever.
Right.
It's an ongoing practice.
We still have that toe in the third dimensional frequency, and it can disrupt us at time. But one of the things for me was the ability to love on a different level, like without judgment, without even knowing someone. You can meet them and you love them on a soul level, which is a much different level than that human level of judgment. And, someone pissed you off. Well, I'm not going to love you today. It's just an ongoing flow is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Agreed. I could relate.
You always see the spark in people that, there's that connection that happens when nothing happens to bring it together. It's just that normal connection. Isn't that what's happening too?
I think so.
So what do you do now? Are you still living in New York? You mentioned that you're selling your place.
Yeah. So as Nicole knows,
she's had a long journey with this one.
What is this? This story
That's an
is
ongoing conversation.
It's so long. So I decided to put the apartment up for sale in September 2022. So we're talking 2 years ago.
Okay.
And three real estate agents later, 4 offers later, that 3 fell through. Knock on wood. Finally, we have an offer, but everything is such slow as molasses, and there's just a lot of difficulties to kind of get to this finish line. So it's been a 2-year journey, which should never have taken 2 years. Usually real estate is pretty fluid and fungible in New York City. At most it was probably going to be like a 6-month ordeal. And that's why I took the risk, because I was like, I'm going to quit my job, quit my career, and just sell the place and get out of here. And unfortunately, let's sell the place, get out of here hasn't been as quick as I anticipated. for reasons we probably can gather, there's just a lot of change going on. And I truly believe New York is your harbinger, your canary in the coal mine. You see things going on in New York, and then it starts to like ebb out to the rest of the country and the world in some ways. And same thing with coronavirus, right? We were the first to be hit in a lot of ways. And, we went through the curve early in early 2020, and then the rest of the country it kind of branched out, and, they all experienced it later on. But yeah, the apartment is just about hopefully be closed soon. Like today's the day they're getting interviewed, the buyers,
Good.
so by the board. And so I'll find out when my close date is. Hopefully it'll be like in another 2 weeks, which I'll be out by then. And so yeah, it's like this close. It's this close.
It'll go this
So
time.
where is the move going after you must have some idea at this point where you're
Nope.
going to head off?
No, I'm
Okay.
just cashing out, and
Yep.
I've been here in Connecticut on and off for 3 years since I finally decided to leave New York. Well, I mean, I'm still in New York. I'm there a lot, and I live there. It's my home. But I've been bouncing back and forth and traveling and just doing a lot of different things, being flexible. And in the meantime, I'm going to kind of figure it out. I have a few projects that I've been working on that won't, allow me to put some roots down just yet. And I just want to see kind of where, I can maybe settle down a little bit with the other aspirations I have going on. And then I'll make that determination of, where home will be.
So, being as spiritual as you are now, have you, because it's taken you a while to sell and all the rest, have you accepted the fact that maybe it just wasn't meant to be at that point in time, and that's why things didn't turn out the way where you thought it was going to be at that point?
I think so. And this is where Nicole and I have had our ongoing long conversations about like what else can be done. I think maybe Nicole, you can help me here. I think it was an energy thing to a degree. It was a surrendering of, the truth, even though I was saying, yeah, I want to leave. I think my heart wasn't ready to leave. Like it's an identity. It's not just, leaving an apartment. New York and who I was, that Sarah was a New York person, and there was an identity that I had to let go. And I think inherently, again, that knowing was telling me, you got to finish your manuscript before you can move. You got to prove to the universe you're serious in what you just proclaimed. I quit. I surrender. I'm going to write a book. That was in my apartment in January 2022. And I finally finished, and Nicole knows the story. I finally finished the last paragraph in June of this year, 2024. And I put my pen down, or the computer laptop closed. I went for a walk, as I typically do, because I'm connecting a lot with nature these days. And within an hour, my real estate agent called and said, you have an offer. So you couldn't time it any better than this. I think that's what it was. It was a surrendering of the persona, the identity, and following through with what I said I would do. Is I'm going to write this book. This is why I'm ending everything I know. I'm dedicating my effort and focus and energy to completing this task.
Yeah. And, we talked about too, is how at one point you lived where everybody in the world would want to live. You talked about being by where Trump's offices were. And in your mind, that is how you defined yourself as having made it.
It's my trophy.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got 1 foot there, but 1 foot knows it needs to pull you a little more. If you're trying to go to the left, you got to go to that right. Cast your net to the right. And so I think that was a lot of your struggle in terms of giving up that idea of who you thought you were to become who you really are.
And the healing too that needed to be done. Right. And you helped me with some quantum healing in the apartment, right?
We did some stuff.
I mean, it was a bit of a story, not only did you help me tremendously, like I got called to Guatemala and the end of, was it January of this year, to work with the Mayan medicine women, which was something I didn't expect to happen. It just kind of plopped, into my radar, and I took advantage. So not only was I doing that sort of energy work with the healers in Guatemala, which will be the third book of the trilogy. But then I came home, right? And then I said, Nicole, what more can we do? And you did that virtual healing for me. And we released some real
Ooh.
energy, right?
Ooh, we
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot in
It
there. There was a lot in there. And we can talk about trauma all we want, but until we truly release it, physically purge it from our body, it just kind of keeps settling lower and lower and lower. And that's what I'm finding is everything's popping up now because our bodies have switched. And I talked about this from that dense carbon base where you can bury everything to this light crystalline body where it's like, where did that come from? I don't, it just all of a sudden, all these memories flood back, not just from when I was little, but, lineage, past lives. Things are just, it's been for me a crazy couple weeks in terms of having to remember things to solidify my future, if you will. And so that's an exhaustion, such exhaustion with these energies, such exhaustion. But that all of that opened the way. I mean, I know you had Emboldened Adventures when we started talking, but what was your epiphany? I love the name. I've always loved that name because that it's you. That's the new you. What was your epiphany for the name, and what are you going to do with it?
So Embolden Adventures was born in 2016. And it was born during the time I was unemployed for 2.5 years straight. So when I lost my job in, what was it, early 2015, it was like January, I found out my job was lost. And I came back to my apartment and I was like, crap. All right, I'll just get another job. But it took 2.5 years to get another job. That's how hard it was. And because I, decided to be in the renewable energy industry as an early entrant. I'm an OG in this space for quite a while. And, back then it wasn't a well-formed industry. So it's very, very difficult to find a job because there were no jobs to be had. There were no job descriptions. There's no sort of, world that was there. And we could go into that on another day. I definitely have my stories about the evolution of renewables. And so for me, like one of my creative outlets to get through, it was kind of a dark period, depression, stuck in this apartment, being rejected. Rejection hurts, especially when it happens often. And you identify with your job and you're like, I got to be this. And it's like you take it personally, and I'm my only breadwinner and I had this apartment. I was holding down the mortgage and the maintenance and it was tough. It's a balancing act. I mean, it definitely made me stronger for sure. But I decided I was going to have my creative outlet and just kind of help my own mental health and happiness through just talking about travel. And because I had already, 5-6 years of some real serious travel under my belt, like, why not? Let's kind of put it out there and share. And this is, 2016. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have any of this even
Right.
then, so it was still kind of like a blog, and like a easy website and all that. So I used it as like a sandbox to just kind of be creative with the LLC, with trademarking, with all these other sort of creative endeavors. I tried podcasting for a little bit early on. But I chose the word embolden because I love that word. And the
I do too.
tagline is be emboldened, right? Because it's one thing to be empowered, but it's another thing to be emboldened. And I think emboldened just has an extra oomph to it. And it's conveying exactly what I'm trying to encourage people to see the world. Get out there and see the world. It's a courageous kind of call to action. And no one can do it but you. You can be inspired to see it through my lens, but ultimately it's up to you to get on the plane and go for yourself. And that's kind of where I've been, dabbling in this creative endeavor of mine as I've been juggling, for future jobs from that point onward. But now that I've surrendered, I'm now kind of stepping it up and kind of exploring where this goes. It's an umbrella of different things, and it's opening some interesting doors and creative projects, as you know. But I can't really speak to just yet. But the writing is definitely in the fairway of what the intent is to be emboldened. To try new things and explore and learn who you are.
Yeah. And do you want to take groups to explore? Do you want to, have there's a lot of interest in this now. that I'm seeing, because it's finally being talked about. But this is ancient. This is so ancient. And oftentimes we forget about ceremony. And I've never done ayahuasca. I am not called to do it. I have not had any desire, but I have done psilocybin. I did a lot of psilocybin in Arizona with yoga. We would do yoga in the park during COVID, but we would go into ceremony with in nature, with drums, with crystal bowls, with the chanting. And this, I didn't do a lot. I did enough to have one really big epiphany hit me, it was when I was going through my divorce. And one of the things was, you have never been loved correctly ever by any man you've chosen. But the part that really hit me is the one you have chosen. And it dawned on me that I always pick a certain type of person. And when you have that realization come into your field, you have to look at not just at them, but at yourself. Why do you keep pulling them in?
Same person.
Yeah. It comes back to me. I'm bringing those people into my life. Somehow we're resonating and vibrating, and they're horrible people, So I had to do a lot of reconfiguring about my true essence. And that was like, I think 2020, right in the area of March 2020. And I'm still today, coming to terms with who I am and understanding that right now, the only person I need to get to know is me. Who am I? What do I love? What do I want? What do I desire?
And that's really a very courageous hold that you can have on yourself, because it's all about, we've all through society, that when we put ourselves first, we always were talked about as being selfish, and because we weren't supposed to bring other people forward, or bring ourselves forward. We were supposed to bring everybody else forward. But nowadays we've learned that it's all about what makes you happy, what makes you tick, what are some of the things that excite you in your life, because that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. It's not selfish.
That's the power of travel that I've unlocked for me personally, because yes, it's transformational travel. That's what this is. And whether you're transforming with the power of nature, the wisdom keepers, the plant medicines, but you could also transform by climbing a mountain, right?
Yes.
Or going scuba diving and seeing a beautiful world underwater, such as sharks and whales and all these amazing things. Like, part of Embolden Adventures is to find who you are and what you're made of. We climbed to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. It took us 8 days. We've climbed Mount Fuji. That's also a component that doesn't necessarily have to be the plant medicines or the psychedelics.
No,
but they've been my teachers for sure. And they have led me recently as we awake, 2020 onward, to kind of be honor who you are within, get to know who you are and honor it, and then be confident in that those steps you take.
Right, but part of those steps of learning your own abilities, because whether you're climbing, whether you're swimming, whether wherever you're going, not only are you seeing what is out there, the magnificence of our world, but you're also looking at the magnificence that you see inside of when you're able to do something like that. Because I've been through my own travels as well. And when you see your abilities, then it's like, wow, you sort of are, you learn that the blessings that have made you to be who you are, that you see. If you're staying in the city, you're not going to know your abilities of how you climb the mountain. You're not going to know of the spectacular things that your eyes are going to see, of how the through the years of how the mountains or the things that have been formed through all of this. And never mind, are you going to realize what you're capable of doing, because we are capable of so much that you don't even realize until you're out there into a different surrounding.
Absolutely. And your whole perspective changes, not just about the world, but about yourself. And you can rule things out, you can bring things in, but what it does is it allows you that self exploration inside of you to determine, who am I really? And I am not even, if I go back 10, 20 years, I don't even know that person, because that was who society, you're kind of like, okay, I've got to do this, and I've got to show up at this gala, and I've got to be at this pageant, and I've got to do this. And I look back, and it's, and not that it, I don't put it down, because it did a lot of good, but not, my daughter was in pageants, but certainly not me. But I just think, that wasn't my essence. That wasn't my core. And as I explore myself, I'm very, very comfortable now, with being alone and just reading, going across the street and hanging out on the sand for a little while. And we're taught to stay out of ourselves, not to go in. And in is where every answer lies.
That's right, Nicole. And you said the word on your TikTok account is the word discernment, right? So we know by putting ourselves out there and seeing the world, or being emboldened in ways we, want to kind of push the line a little bit. Travel does that. It's the hero's journey, right? And more broadly, but you learn how to become more discerning and know what feels truth to you. And I think in my case with traveling, part of why I wanted to showcase what I'm seeing, in these countries around the world, beyond just the United States, is that, the news is saying one thing about this country, but, I literally was there, last month, and these people aren't as scary as the news is trying to portray. And so that's one thing, a big gem I have uncovered in my travels, is that I believe 95% of the world is good people at the end of the day. And we've been all over the world, and we've met so many different people who are just so beautiful. You could just feel their happiness. They're proud of their home. Come see it. They're very welcoming, and you realize we're all human at the end of the day. And what the news is telling me is wrong. This can't be true. I was literally just there. So it grows your discernment muscle for sure.
Exactly. And they act as if they have no conscious or just, nothing inside of them. And it's so far from the truth what we're hearing. I believe that to be huge propaganda. And, I've been to some third world countries for sure. And I can remember, on one of my trips was Fiji. And when we flew back, we went to the main island, and the cab driver, and they're poor, they're poor by our standards. They're not really poor. They have family. They have traditions. He was so proud. He took us to his home, which looked like a shanty, but that was home, not a house. I've had houses. I really, as I look back, didn't have a home. He had a home and introduced us to his children. And I was so taken with this man who cared enough that he was proud to show me that. And I'm like, oh, that to me was just like, what am I married to? It was an epiphany. It really was. And so you're right. What we're hearing and what you're seeing can be a very different story, can it?
Yeah, absolutely. I know it. I lived it.
And we start to learn really is the true blessings of what we do have. Being grateful for those small things. Like, it's not on of what you own. It's really of what's in your heart, and the people that you can share your heart with, that really makes the true starting of really what it's all about in life.
That's right.
That you can sit down to and break bread with. And that bread, you don't need to have a feast. The feast can be, doesn't have to be much, but bringing those people that there's love and there's understanding and compassion with each other, that is really what it's totally supposed to be about.
Exactly. Right. The feast is the connection. That's what you're feasting is the connection with others.
Yes.
And, Sarah, when you talk about the heart connection and the love connection, when you can connect on that kind of spiritual plane, of existence, of loving without knowing, of loving without judging, of loving just truly from a pure place in your heart. I mean, you talk about ascension. That
That's right.
that is some ascension when we get to that point. Again, how you always say, I'm goosing. I can feel that. I can feel that in I call it a soul shiver, because it's your soul validating your thought and or your words.
That's right. And you asked me earlier, how did you know to leave your job? It's because it didn't feel right. You get all these
Mhm.
beautiful experiences we're literally just talking about. I too have had those moments where someone is like, come see my home, so proud, and they're in Myanmar, or they're in, the floating islands of Uros in Peru and Lake Titicaca. Come see my home,
Home.
please, and they're so proud. And that this feels right because it's good to be in community. And when you're in an office with artificial lights in a cubicle,
Ugh.
right, in a city that is very isolating and individualized, right, it's a very lonely city, New York. 9 million people of very lonely people who are very much their own kind of nexus, walking around not connected, right? And so that's when like, this isn't working, it doesn't feel right, I'm unhappy and I'm stressed, and this is not necessary. This community is not there. It's zero sum, it's competitive, it's not abundant at all. It's kind of this fixed mindset of this has to be this way, or else you're punished, or else you're fired, or else I'm going to make
Oh,
your life miserable, I'm going to cut you, to demote you, or take your paycheck away. All this is not communal, it's not supportive, it's not loving,
People
it's
aren't
just
bringing you up, they're bringing you down. Everyone's
that's
looking to
right,
get something out of you instead of putting something into you.
that's
So
it.
different way, right? Yeah.
when I was in New York, I remember just sitting. I don't even remember what street I was on, but it was like 5 o'clock, and I was looking down. I was at a TGI Fridays and just people in the streets walking home in tennis shoes. But it wasn't camaraderie. It was everybody like this. It was zombie-ish. No one was laughing or talking or joking. You could just see them all just scurry, like little rats getting somewhere. I thought, who can live like this? And you came out of it, but I just it's not really living. I think it's just more existing.
It's worth experiencing. I don't want to totally like knock on my beautiful city. I love New York. There's so many
Mm.
awesome things about it. And, I have such great memories I'll be walking away from, but you're right. I mean, I live where my apartment, it's, I think, 92 units. It's a pre-war, it's on 57th Street. And I don't know any of my neighbors. And I've lived there for
Don't
13
know your
years.
neighbors?
That's
No,
crazy.
I
Wow.
talked to my doorman. That's it. I don't know any of my 92 units.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. Well, yeah. I can honestly say because I'm from Toronto and I live. It's a very large city, but I know all my neighbors. I lived in a when I lived in a house, I knew everybody around my area. But it's all depending on the person, right? Because I'm the type of person who walks up to people and talks, and not everybody will do that. So it is a bit, and the hustle and bustle of big cities sometimes does that. I'm not saying the same happens when you get downtown, but it's looking if you, first of all, if it wasn't for New York, you wouldn't be the person you are today. So this is all that forms you. So we have to be learning that we have to hold on to the gratitude of the things that formed you to who you are. Yes, you broke out of that, and now you're seeing a new person emerge, or not a new person, but a more refined, loving person who's coming out. And but we all have to start, and we all have to grow somewhere. So now that you have grown and you've learned so much, any little tidbits of what your next adventure will be coming up?
Oy, well, I don't have anything on the books yet, which is really unusual. I usually have like a big trip or two planned out in advance, the 9 months from now or whatnot. But because I've been in such flux with this life shift, I really couldn't prioritize travel in the way I used to. My focus was my book. My focus is selling the apartment, changing things up. But trips have been coming in here and there, kind of in their own timing, almost like a surprise pop in, like the Guatemala trip, for instance. So I'm right now having that mindset that, what's going to happen once, I let go and move and get settled, what will come my way, and I'll embrace it. So I feel it might be a scuba diving trip. We'll see. I haven't been diving in a while, so I'm hoping to get back in the water. I have a few friends that are dive certified that, have been saying, hey, let's figure this out. So that might be in the horizon, but I do want to get my book published, and that's going to be a 2025 event. So that's my priority at the moment.
Well, hopefully when you have your book published and you're ready, you can come back on again, and then you can share your book with us, and we can get copies of it, but talk to people about it. So as we're sort of coming to the end of our hour, and I just want to ask, if somebody is looking to go into their own adventure, what, sort of getting out there and trying to find themselves, what advice would you give to them?
Oh, that's what Embolden Adventures will become, is this sort of like mastermind and kind of hand-holding for those that, are newbies and novices when it comes to really traveling. And so the advice will come over time as we work together and continue to explore. But I would say generally is, if you feel called, because not a lot of people want to travel, and that's okay too. But if you feel the call, like, I really want to see the world, like, I've heard so many people say, man, I want to do what you do. Man, I want to see the world like you do. And I'm like, you can. I'm not special. And it can be done. Can be cost effective in a lot of ways. And, it's building a courage muscle to get to the plane. And once you get off the plane, then you're like, oh no, what do I do now? Like and then you do it again and again, and next thing you know, you're climbing a mountain. Like, okay, I got this too. It's a relative, courage build. And so that's what I would encourage people to trust, that you can get there. If you want to see the Eiffel Tower, you can, right? It's possible, and it can be a dream come true. You just got to trust that if there's a will, there's a way, and you can allow for it to happen for you.
I love it. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us these wisdoms, which are so important in life, is to listen to your calling, listen to what you have. And Nicole, as always, we love to hear what your summations are.
This has been such an important conversation for everybody. And I think the most important thing that we've talked about, and Sarah's really been an example of how to do this, is learn who you are, learn what you want, and then seek it. Because she could have said, well, I spent all that money on an education. My parents will be disappointed. I've got to stay in New York City all my life to make this kind of money. I live on this street. I do this. And instead, she followed something truer than any of that. And she followed her heart. And she's still doing so. And I know she will continue to do so. And for everybody out there, your heart is your true center. It will tell, your body will tell you, your heart will tell you. And to really understand all that you are and all that you will ever be is just listen. Just sit in your silence. Just listen, feel into your body, and follow that. Don't let the chatter of the outside sway you in any capacity, because no one knows you better than you. That's all I got.
Very wise words. I love it. So if you're looking that you want to go out and start to do the adventures like Sarah has, but it doesn't have to be like Sarah's, you just want to get out and you just want to have the adventure of life, just to figure out who you are. There's a link below that you can contact Sarah with and have a chat and see what happens when she starts to talk directly to you. Because remember, we all are owed that. It's your life. Enjoy it. You only have one life to live, and it goes by very quickly. So go enjoy. And most importantly, come back and talk to us and tell us all about it. Sarah, thank you again so very much.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And for everybody, remember to share us and love us and give us a few comments and tell us where you want to go to next. Take care and have a great day.